Am I close enough so the sound is getting recorded?
I'll hear you.
Okay, okay. Well, this is a tour of part of what was originally the Bradley Farms, and part of it now is the Reed property, but when we get near borders, we'll be certain to point out which is which, because
Absolutely.
that's an important issue. And Robert S. Bradley is going to be the principal character, and he's going to reminisce, and his cane is just a prop. He doesn't need it. He's just trying to act elderly.
In case you disagree with me.
And with him today to assist his memory is Diana, his daughter, Douglas, his son, holding Rocky, our cat, Sharon Reed, and Roberta Reed, owner of part of this land. And in a minute we'll show you Tim Reed.
I don't think so.
No, it's still on. Turn it on.
Railroad.
But don't talk yet.
Don't talk yet.
No, you go ahead.
I can talk. This is part of the railroad property, but they had a model farm. This is all muck down in here. It's all tiled, and the drain went way down to the swamp. They used to raise celery out there when, back in 1915 or so. Now, where's the path across here? Where do you go?
Well, the path is back here. Do we need to go back there?
Where's the little concrete house we kept?
Yeah, what's that for?
That's part of the drainage system for the muck land here.
Oh.
But somebody slipped the cover down in there and plugged it all, I guess.
You want to talk about what this was before this house was here?
This was a good alfalfa field. Now it's a house. You can't raise crops on a house.
That's pretty profound.
I just say that for her benefit.
I think this was more of a brome grass field than alfalfa. But stuff would always be high, and we'd have to go so slow. We were always late. And we've tipped tractors over on this fence row up here. Both David and Bob and I have tipped tractors over. But we'd always get real heavy bales out of here. We'd always find huge snapping turtles here in the summer. And I think that's my biggest memory, is a snapping turtle probably 30 inches in diameter coming out of that well. We'd always bring the New Jersey kids over and show it to them, and we really did scare them. But that's all right.
Yeah, they deserved it.
About the ram was right in here. There's a little dam, and the water was backed up into here. And the way the principle of the ram is, the water is up above here, and it goes down pipe down, and then it shuts it off. Well, there's another pipe that goes up, and it's got a check valve here. So it would go down, stop quick, push the water up, because a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Isn't that right, Terry? Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Well, that is piped from there, right up over the top of that hill, all the way to the barn up there.
Over by Boyd's?
Yeah.
All over to Boyd's. There's a water line all the way up through there, right underneath the railroad.
So you had to have enough water so there's no pressure.
Well, hydraulically, it had a dome on the top, see, so it would compress the air. The water would go up in there and push the air. Then there was the water pipe went up from that, see, so every time it would go, it would push it up a little bit, push it up to the pipe. Well, old man Ducat lived over there. And he said to his wife one day, well, he did it quite often, I gotta go check the ram, make sure it's running. So he walked down here, he checked the ram, and he kept right on going. I can't remember the guy's name lived in that house there, but he had some awful good hard cider. Well, his wife hitched the horse up on the buggy just as soon as he left. And when he come out of the cellar, wiping his face off, why, she was right there to greet him. That was the end of his coming over to check the ram. Ducats ran the farm for the railroad for quite a few years. When my father bought the farm where he lives in 1906 or so, Elton and Homer was father. Homer's father too was ahead of him. But Elton walked to the school, and he used to have eat his dinner with his grandfather and grandmother, and he was very unhappy when my father bought the farm and his grandfather and grandmother moved to Roanoke. And they got into the milling business down there, making flour. I forgot the name of the flour now. It had a beautiful name.
Roanoke Roller Mills.
Yeah, it's the Roanoke Roller Mills.
Oh. Okay.
That's right. Which way are we going?
Well, which way do you think?
I don't care.
I want to go to Dam Robert. This way.
Dam Robert.
Don't you know where the places are here?
I know where Gilligan's Island is.
No, it's Dam Robert.
Well, you want to go to the dam? We used to be covered, see, it had a wooden building over it, and packed it with straw everywhere, so it wouldn't freeze.
We're looking for a ram. I still don't understand why they called it a ram.
Because it would ram the water up the hill.
Oh, jeez. It rammed the water, that's why.
The ram is back where the trees are.
Right back where
You
the
better get
trees are.
Douglas's duck box in there too.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll zoom in on that. Where is it?
Right.
This
Now.
is built with a steam engine to get
Well,
water.
Huh.
It's part of it.
Oh!
It's drained right.
You gotta look at the camera.
I don't want to look at the camera.
Tell the story.
Well, the story is that was the holding for the water, and there's two lines that go across to the railroad, two 6-inch galvanized, no. What kind of pipe is it?
Just iron.
No, yeah, cast iron. That's all, cast iron pipe. And over at the railroad, they had cisterns, big cisterns. And they worked with on a principle of a floats. When this one was full, then this float would shut it off and make the water go in the other one. And the trains would come up, and they had a big standpipe over there, and they had a pump that way back when I was a kid they pumped with steam, a steam pump. Then they switched it to gasoline. Then they finally got to electric. Well, these engines double head. We call them double headers because they would have an engine up front with a bunch of cars in there. They were heading for the, and they'd pull up there, and the last engine would stop and fill up with water at the tank and drop their ashes. The other one had gone on with the train. It was switching up in the yards. Well, then the engine that was there, get that, he'd go up, he'd unhitch from the train, go up, and he'd go to switching, and the other engine go back down and fill up with water and drop his ashes usually. So then then he would pull the train up, and invariably they would block the crossing with the train. So they had both engines switching in the yards and moving the cars around. They didn't have to have a flagman on the railroad then. See, they had it blocked with the cars. But you came along with it, you could sit and wait.
Okay, for a while.
Yeah. So one day we were coming from the law farm with 2 or 3 loads of hay. We came down the hill, and they had the main line was blocked the crossing. So my father said, "Put him right on the switch." The guy came with the engine. He says, "Get those off the track." And he said, open the road and we'll go." And they opened the road finally because he said he was going to push the wagon load of hay right off there. Open that, move, cut your train. Oh, crap.
Is it true that we used to cut them and they'd roll all the way to Pavilion Center?
Another one of
Who told you that?
Well, I couldn't figure it out, but
When you cut them, the brakes go on automatically, usually.
so much for rumors.
See, now we're going to have to tell the truth.
I mean, why didn't they take it from that little area of pond down on in that field over on the other side of the house?
With what? Didn't have any electricity. See, all we had was natural gas, and when they did put electric in that house, it was Delco system. You pumped you started up a gas engine and started the motors, and they had big batteries, and you charged up the batteries. That leads me right into something else. When we wanted electric at our place, or my father, we didn't have it, and he'd applied for it, waited 10 years, never had gotten any. So, but the batteries, Milligan's batteries were just about shot, so we couldn't get enough people. Well, he made enough, 6 of them. I think we had to have 6 signed up. So we signed up 6 people, and they built the line for us. Rural electrification line.
That reddish wood duck box on the other side was designed to provide a place for wood ducks to nest. And what happens is they will stake out a territory, and this is a really good territory because it's protected. Got a great big swamp. There's lots of crustaceans, a whole little pond here, which is in the spring really full of water. And in a couple of years I've checked it, I found wasp nests, but never any wood ducks. But it's still nice to have, and it's real easy to maintain, so I just leave it there. Maybe next year. Okay, this is the ram, probably 50 years later. When we were growing up, there's a little shack around it, and the whole idea was to run this stream of water right through it. And that's what generated the hydraulic pressure. But it's hard to believe that thing is probably only 15 inches high and maybe a foot in diameter, would pump water over half a mile, but it did. We always used to tease kids saying that the ram was a great big buck sheep that would run over them. And we were very effective at scaring people with that line, especially since we had about 1,000 sheep at the time, and they didn't know whether to believe us or not. But that's the ram right there.
Hey, Popper. Popper, I heard a rumor that you liked the ram an awful lot because it didn't cost a cent and it ran all day for nothing.
Well, that's about right. There's my fork.
The one you left. Your railroad fork.
What'd you do with it down here?
That's not your fork.
It is.
The railroad fork. No. It's a manure fork.
It's a red railroad fork.
It's got head enough for the railroad fork.
Yes, it was.
The railroad fork? Get the railroad fork, Tim.
Tim.
I don't know how they ever broke this.
It's a manure fork. The railroad ones.
It wasn't a manure fork. The railroad used them to put the ballast in under the rail.
Jail bars. Well, when they built the new jail, these were taken off of the old jail, and we used to use it to rake the stones in the driveway. This is where we store it.
He planted beans, and he got Dick Laurie to help him. And Dick was rather a strange character. He'd call him Mr. Bagoni. They were working on there and planting the beans. And, Paul said to Dick, "Why don't you call me Paul?" "I'll do that, Mr. Bagoni." Oh well.
Tell me the truth about this pine forest here. Who planted this?
Whoa.
Well, I hate to put it on film.
Get it on. We want to know this.
I think it's Bob.
David doesn't think so.
Who?
David doesn't think so.
Well, I don't.
We planted it about
All right,
5
Douglas.
times, Tim, because the you know what railroad burned it off.
No, they burned that one off.
My trees were over there; they got burned.
No, those were my trees that got burned.
And then David harvests them and sells them all. So I guess our trees became his trees. So little Bob replants them. Then he's got some that are 20 years old and some that are 10 years old, and he figures they're all his.
Ah.
But other than that, I guess who's planted trees here? Roberta has, I have, Dave has, Bob has. These are probably, got to be ours, don't they?
They're our trees. Definitely our trees.
I think that's a good compromise.
Whose trees are they?
Ours.
This is not a dinosaur bone. This is, no,
A pterodactyl.
no, it's a hip bone from a cow, but I don't know why it's here.
Roughly, we own the highland and she owns the low.
We want this on tape here.
On the floor,
Go ahead.
That's all right. I wasn't going to say anything more.
Go ahead, tell
All
about
I
my
get's an
property.
argument from her, so I don't say anything.
We're fairly near the boundary line right now between the high and the low. And to the left is the railroad swamp.
Which we call the beaver meadow.
Oh, why?
Why? Because there were beavers in there one time. And that matter of fact, it was a tamarack swamp. The water was pretty, what color would it be?
Brown.
Red, brownish stuff.
Acid.
See, they pumped the water from the swamp. If you go down the road there to the Lehigh mine, they were pumping the water. Now, I don't know what they needed so much. It must have been for the steam, for the steam boilers. And there was a great big water tower there. And they pumped so much water out of the swamp that it actually got a little low. So when Leroy Salt Company came up here to the junction, and they drilled a test well, and they found there was salt up here too. Of course, everybody knew there was. And they came over and bought the mill property. This was probably about 1910, and they were going to pipe the water from the Wax Creek over, and they were going to build a complex over here, salt, to evaporate the salt. Well, before they got much done, International Salt came over and bought out Leroy and closed it. See? So that was all done, and Leroy Salt was done. Then there was nothing left there, and they tore it all down. But the Lehigh mine was on Route 19. Oh, I remember my father telling about going to that, going up into it before they closed it. But that was not a, that was a, what do you call it? Well, you went down there and you mined it. Just like they did down, just like you would a coal mine. So and that went all the way up this, they came up this way. So there were, and over towards Ed Howard's, after they closed it, there was a hole over there that they had for air vents. And they flooded it, and it pushed the salt water, they claimed, out into his woods. So then they called them, they sued them, and they came back and they had to pump it down somewhere or other and get it down enough so that they cemented that all in. I've never been able to find that spot, but the other thing about that Lehigh mine was when they were digging it in the first place, they went down about 100 feet or less, and they hit so much water it just came pouring in there. And then they had to cement that back. Then they went down to, say, I was roughly 1,600, someplace in there, 10 to 1,600, and into the salt. They never hit any more water. So the theory was, if you don't hit water in the first 200 feet in this country, there's not much use of going down, because there just isn't any water down there. If it is, it'll be dry and brackish stuff. You can shut that thing off now.
Oh. Want to take a picture of the marker?
Where's this marker?
Right in there.
You're trying to hide it under a tree, MP.
Well, let's see. Is that tree mine or Roberta's?
I don't see a marker. Oh, there it is. Well, I got to get way up close to see that.
It says BR&P on that side, and this side it says property. That's Buffalo, Rochester, and Pittsburgh Railroad. Okay?
What is it, Douglas? Look at those leaves.
The one in the corner.
That is a maple tree. About this peninsula.
I don't know anything about this peninsula.
All right.
All I can tell you is that way back during when Sandals lived over here, there was a passenger train came up here and got stuck in the snow. The snow was so deep over here on the railroad, they got stuck. And they were there for, oh, I don't know, a couple of 3 days before they got the thing dug out. What do you think of that? Do you believe that? Well, I can't remember the whole story, but they told how much they were getting for their eggs because they didn't have anything to eat, see? And they were carrying the food over, eggs and stuff like that, over to the train. And it was a pretty good deal. I think they shoveled snow in the boiler. They're into the, what do you call it? Where they carry water tank. And to make enough water to keep the steam up.
On yet?
Yep.
Okay, are you pointing toward the back of the hill?
Yep.
Okay, this is the back of the hill behind the house. And the evergreen trees that we already discussed. Here's the railroad swamp, which is now the reed swamp, better known as Reed's Reeds. And in the distance is the peninsula behind Hackenmiller's. And those are also trees that were planted by either David or Bob or Douglas or whoever wants to take the credit for it, and burned several times. Okay, and the railroad is to the right of that, and that is which railroad? The B&O. The B&O.
Rochester and Southern now.
Now called the Rochester and Southern. And as you keep going, you're going to see the other railroad, which is the reason they call it the Junction. The Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western, the DL and W. And where those...
Linger and wait. You see that? They used to drop their ashes when they came up there for water.
Okay, this is the final on the ram. The ram is to the right of this hill. If you see the far edge of the evergreens, the ram is down there. Now we're going to slowly pan south to show you where it pumped the water to. Pumped it in a half-inch line up this hill, across this wheat field, onto the railroad. You can see the roof of the old barn, but they really pumped it into a wooden storage tank. And when the storage tank was full, it was probably 500 gallons or so. It then would go into a cistern, which is under the corn crib. So we had half-inch stream of water 24 hours a day, every day. And my father loved that because it was very cheap. He didn't have to watch it, and the water was high quality.
This was a double line here with 2 lines of switches on each side too. And back during the Depression, they shoved that one line full of, one switch full of empty coal cars. Worst place you ever see. You come up your road there, the Bernd Road, and you couldn't see anything. You had to sneak up there and look. And you could almost get killed every time you came across the crossing because there was no warning, no nothing. And the trains had come so fast both ways. They were old steamers, but they would go through here 80 to 90 miles an hour. It's like nothing.
What do you remember about the old railroad station that's burned down now?
Well, that was where they had an elevator in there, and we used to like to ride the elevator up. But the cars, the little hand cars that they brought the mail in on, they'd load it off of the B&O or the BR&P, whichever it was then, and push it in the building and go up on the elevator and put it on the Lackawanna. And then they'd load it up there. My father always used to take the stairs 2 at a time to see how good his heart was bleeding. He'd run up.
Did you ever take a trip from that station?
Oh yes, you know. I went to New York with my mother when I was about 5 years old. And we had somebody, Stratton, Elizabeth, no? Lily Stratton with us. We went to New York, got to Hoboken, and Uncle Charlie, that was my great uncle, but my mother's uncle, met us. And we took the ferry, and he took us around the Statue of Liberty. Now, I was not quite 5 at the time. It was quite a sight. I remember it very well. It was dark. Then we got on the come back to the end and got on the Pennsylvania and went to Hoboken. No, went to South Amboy where he lived then. And that was electrified there, that railroad was. I can't remember whether it was up above, whether it was a wire above, or whether it was a third rail. I guess it was a third rail.
How did this station happen to burn down? Did they ever find out? Yeah.
Well, yes. They finally switched the elevator over to electric, and they had a guy there, and there was a switch. The motor was partially burned out. So instead of getting the motor fixed, they put some copper pennies up behind so it wouldn't blow a fuse, so it wouldn't blow out. And it was on a Sunday, and then boy, she let loose. It burned and burned and burned.
When was
Black
that?
smoke. Well, I don't know. We were bringing one of the kids home from camp. That's the only reason I know it was on a Sunday.
But in the early 60s.
Early 60s?
Because they didn't have any passenger service after. Now there was one passenger train coming through. They had to wait. Come think about it, because it warped the rails a little bit. They had to wait till they cooled off before they could let the train through. I remember Don Robley was down there with that little old pumper that the fire company had. And he said, I gotta have some more water. I said, why don't you put the hose right in this ditch here? Well, he says, I'll pump that dry in no time at all. I said, if you pump that dry, I'll be awfully surprised. You just start pumping. He put the pump in there, and they started pumping water. Never even lowered it any. It was pumping around the swamp.
What do you remember about this railroad over here? About the steam trains?
Well, the steam trains, oh damn. They used to come up here, coming out of Rochester, and this was where they get water again. And they had well, when I was a kid, they had a steam engine over there to pump the water up into the reservoir, or the, what do you call it, tanks to fill the engine.
Storage tanks.
Storage tank. So then they switched to gasoline, and then they went to electric. They got a three-phase line in there. Well, anyway, it was up on the other side. That big went all the way to Charlie Sinclair's, those lines, those rails did. And the Lackawanna had one all the way up there, and they would pull those empties down there for the B&O, and they'd get the key from the station agent. They had I remember they had a great big ring on it, so you couldn't get it in your pocket. You could put it over your hand. And they'd go up there and they'd pull those big 1,600 steamers down through there, get on and open the switch and back and leave the cars and back down on the main line of the B&O.
Oh yeah, half a mile up there.
Yeah, went all the way up
sure,
there. They had
6 bays of switches in there.
They had oh yeah. There's nothing left now. They
There's
sold
still
it
some
all.
tracks in there, but
Took it all. There's no tracks, no
Yeah.
rails left, no ties left. They took them all.
But they'd bring like 150 cars full of coal up in there.
Yeah.
Then they'd unhook, and then they'd back the empties out.
If you walk down the railroad here, you come to some ruined little buildings, some foundations of buildings, just about the edge of our property there. Can you tell what those were all about?
Well, that was the pump house for the water, for the steamer.
There was a
And
change there too, or what?
they were scheduled to be painted, so they came to paint them. But while they were painting them, the crew came to tear them down and burn them up. So they had to wait till they got through painting them, the paint dried, so they could
burn them?
take them down and burn them up.
Oh, jeez.
That was railroad efficiency. But they didn't have any operation down there, only when they used to have a coal bin there when they fired it with coal. I want to tell you, you're talking about buildings. Old Floyd Legg worked for he was a lantern man on the Lackawanna. And he was up there between where Fern lived and Ragoni's Crossing. He was going along with his one-man scooter, going along, and done one lantern there, and he didn't keep track of his time, and the noon train came. Well, he got on there, and he was caught between there, and there wasn't any place to set the scooter off. The train is going about 80 miles an hour behind him. The old Floyd is just a ho ho ho, just a going. And he got to the crossing. He jumped off the scooter, and he jumped off the scooter. He took right a hold of it and set it all off in one motion. He never stopped, the fastest he ever moved. But the old train went zoom. I don't think they ever saw him. I don't think the engineer ever saw him there. Because they were really crowding him. They didn't give him any time at all to get off.
What's your favorite Melvin Marvin railroad story?
Well, his bicycle was about all I can remember.
What was that all about?
Well, he used to ride his bicycle to work, of course, rather than walk. He had one, he had it so long, it was so old they couldn't even buy a part for it. Yeah, I don't know.
Did you say he was a car knocker?
Oh, that was his nick. That was what they called the car inspectors.
Oh.
They call them car knockers. They'd go along and they'd hit the wheels to see if they rang right. Make sure when they cracked wheels. It was unbelievable. I remember him telling a story about they lost a car of Jello, and he was in there, and they started saying, we gotta send a search through for this car of Jello. We can't find it. It was loaded and we can't find it. And they told him the number. Why, he says, you pushed it way up there on such and such a switch. It sits right up there. They went up there, that's where it was. He told them it was.
Did you say there was a robbery once, a train robbery?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was quite exciting around here. We didn't come over to the depot at night when the train robberies were going on. They'd back a car or truck right up to the car and break the seal and open her up and load the truck right up with stuff. Head for Buffalo, I guess. I don't know where they went. But then they got a lot of detectives around here, and I guess I told you, they shot one of the black man, and old Burge up the pavilion was the undertaker. He put a good lot of embalming fluid in him and stood him up against the wall, and they took a picture of him. We didn't have any more robberies after that. Nobody ever claimed his body.
What was that story you were telling Sharon about the trying to punish the boss that was so mean to them?
Old Hart?
Yeah.
Well, he was the section boss. He was mean, but he had mostly Italians working for him, but they did have a couple of black guys. So the Italian guys got so mad at him one day, they tied him to the rail and went off and left him. But the black guys untied him before the train got there. And so he fired all the Italians. He had all blacks after that. He wouldn't hire anyone. He was quite a character.
Just a question about how many trains per day would go through here. I know you had passengers like at 10, 11, no, 11 and 12 and 6, and one at midnight. So you had 4 passengers, but how often did the freights come through?
I really don't remember.
It seemed like there were a lot of them.
My mother, when she moved here in 1907, said there were 7 different trains a day you could go to Buffalo on. You could go on the Lackawanna. You could take the B&O, or what was it, VRP then, to Leroy. Then you had a choice of the Erie, the Lehigh Valley, the New York Central, and I don't know where they are. And you could take this one and go to Salamanca and catch a train into Buffalo too. You could go almost any place on trains in those days.
Well, we never needed watches because we had passenger trains.
Oh,
the only problem was you didn't know whether it was 11 o'clock or the 12 o'clock.
20 minutes to 12 that train would come down through. With the horses, that was about time to quit and start for the barn. When we had horses. Well, they were doing 60 to 70 through there. Because they didn't always stop at the junctions.
People ever get killed?
No, we came awful close to them.
Wow.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. Tell us about the gas wells.
Where is it?
Go ahead.
There he is over there. This well was about the last one that was drilled here back of the first bunch of wells that were drilled. Then they came in a few years ago and drilled more, but this was drilled with an all metal rigging, and it sat there for years before they took it down. Pretty good well. We used to come over here when we were kids. They had to get you back in that corner there, and they start to drop the bailing line. They go down around 900 feet. The old building will be shaking like this, and they put the brakes on. The smoke would come off on the brakes.
They have a cable line to drop her down the hole.
Yeah.
And then the baler was what, just a tube with a
The
bottom
baler was
stuff?
on the bottom. They'd bail it, and they'd drop the tools out there, raise that up, drop the tools. I can't remember whether they used steam on this one or not. They were in the, they might have used a gas line and run on a gas engine and run on gas. I can't remember. It's been too many years.
That'd be like 1920 they were down there?
Oh,
Around that 20?
I think so. About the last one.
Well, what about that underpass there, and what about that machine that was left in it? Can you tell us about that? Because anybody who's been over there would wonder what that's all about.
Well, the underpass is where the cows go through. So they could go, come and wander back here and up here and pasture up here on top of this mountain here.
Box Mountain.
Box Mountain.
And what's the machine that's stored in there?
That's a inches cutter for filling style.
Oh.
Want to buy it?
How much? Is it an antique? Is it worth anything?
No, it isn't
Been there
worth
30
it.
years.
Yeah, that was a good one though. It was a self-feeder. It wasn't plugging up all the way.
Also cut arms, hands, whatever else, whatever you stuck in.
Shovels, forks.
What about the multiflora roses growing all over here?
That was, we got sold a deal that said that was a living fence. But it didn't live fast enough. When it didn't come up fast enough. Now, actually, it all ought to be cut down, destroyed. So
Where was the fence line?
that wasn't the fence line. That was where we had it.
Where was it supposed to?
Well, we wanted to stop it there. The fence line was up here on top of the hill. They worked all this side hill.
What about the railroad house where Dutton's is? What was that originally built for?
That was built for the railroad. It was a double. The one above it was a single, and the one over where Macy's lived was another railroad house, where Jack Hart lived, the section boss.
So the railroad provided housing for these guys that are out in Illinois?
Well, pretty much. I mean, there wasn't any. That was one of the newer houses here, Dutton's house, or the railroad house. The railroad used to go, or the road used to go right up over the railroad there. And that was back Hendy's. Hendy's went on top of the hill there, and they picked up the people where Maine lives now, the old Gage place. They went to Leroy to something. When they came back, they want to take them home. They drove the team in a closed carriage. They drove right in front of that fast midnight flyer. Well, they were all killed, including the team of horses. And it was quite a shock to the neighborhood. I don't know whether that was Mrs. Ernest Woodward's parents, I think.
Hendy Hill was named after them.
The
obviously.
Hendys, yeah.
Hendys.
I can remember when they did that. It wasn't so many years ago. These people, all the way, the Wards, Gages, and all the rest of them, they wanted that new road to go in front of their house. Yeah, they sued and did everything else, but they lost. Then after they got the new road over there, and it was nice and quiet on their road, they wondered why they ever wanted the new road up in front of Junction Pavilion Center. See that? that started right up there to Gilmore's, or my grandfather Bradley's old place. And that's where they took it off, that new road, and went through Pavilion Center. That was a new road. There was no road there at all. Only crossroads up over the hill there at Pavilion Center. What do you call that place, that beer joint?
Cloverleaf?
Cloverleaf.
Never been there.
Had enough rock?